I was first approached about 5 years ago by Devi Art Foundation to curate a show around the theme of diaspora. After some initial resistance, I began to think about how you could recontextualize the whole term of diaspora. Perhaps not so much thinking about Indian artists who were living or working abroad, but thinking about diaspora as more of an umbrella or universal condition. So thinking about artists who are moving in various directions, not just in one trajectory. The show is of course called Black Sun and relates to the idea of the eclipse. And for me, I'm very interested in this notion of the eclipse and how it relates both to ideas of classical alchemy and transformation and transcendence, but how that maps out to different points on the globe. Matti Braun is probably a very good example of this, because although German, his installation in the show refers to a Satyajit Ray film that was never made called The Alien. And this seemed a very apt way to kind of think not just about alien, but what is self and other, but also very interesting that a German artist was excavating this particular history, and therefore perhaps making himself part of the Indian diaspora. In essence, we are all diasporic. That, lines on a map, nation states, are only fictions invented by man, first in consciousness and then enacted in reality. The earliest work in the show is a film by Maya Deren, Ritual and Transfigured Time, from 1946, drawing attention to Maya Deren's position as an émigré Russian Jew ending up in New York, which in a way, if you think of diaspora, the Jewish diaspora is perhaps one of the most iconic diasporas. And there's almost a parallel in contemporary artist Lisa Oppenheim, also being New York Jewish, but referring back to the eclipse of the sun, which obviously, given the title of the show, Black Sun, is a key theme. Her heliograms use an image of the sun from 1976, re-exposed onto specially prepared photographic paper. Some days or some points in the day, the image is absent because there was no sun. Some days there is no illumination. Some days we are just in darkness. As a sort of personal metaphorical state, is an aspiration towards something transcendent, but with the very human awareness that sometimes we fall short of that. And this was a way also for me to take it away from a very specific post-colonial politics into an idea of transformation and alchemy. And there's a connection from that to Tejal Shah's series of photographs. I chose a particular set of works by her that she'd done on residency in Australia, working with a drag queen there. Work is called unfurling. So it's this process of coming out, becoming something other. None of us are as fixed as we'd like to think we are. And for me, I tend to think of the world in a more utopian or heterotopian way. The term heterotopia was coined by the French philosopher Michel Foucault to describe a condition, not utopia, which almost would like to resolve various differences into a single monolithic entity, but a condition in which various subjectivities or methodologies can happily coexist. For Zarina Hashmi, I've included her various monoprints on the city, and I like the way these works elaborate particular cities, but also the idea of cities as a philosophical quantity, i.e. that lines on a map are a form of geometry by which we move from our imagination to literal ideas of place. Included in the show as well are works by Runa Islam, London-based, but originally from Bangladesh. And her work, cinematography, is a wonderful way of film, looking at the very nature of film itself. And for me, I'm quite interested in this idea of the material that the artist uses as almost an alchemical substance. For example, in Runa's film, which we see in the show, cinematography, you have a 16mm camera that actually is operated on a dolly to actually spell out the word cinematography in space. In a way, that kind of idea of geometry runs through the whole show. Classically, geometry actually was almost seen as much as relating to alchemy as to mathematics. And I was very interested to bring that relationship back to the forefront in this show, thinking about where science and the rational meet the mystical. So obviously, Nasreen becomes very key for me because both her meticulous geometric line drawings and her photographs become portals into the future. You know, a very sort of poetic idea of almost seeing across time. And then through the show, you have a series of different movements by different artists across place and across time. James Lee Byers, in the particular show, in the work Autobiography, where he just appears on a film for the briefest second, says something about the ghostly apparition or almost a shamanistic or animist quality behind the whole show that, you know, that later reappears in the work of Ashish Avikuntak, where male devotees of Kali actually cross-dress as the goddess herself. So this idea of belief systems was a very key aspect of the show. Behind me we have Alexandra Singh's assembly instructions, and in brackets IKEA, which playfully combines systems theory and a popular Renaissance idea of the memory mansion. And the dotted lines make these mental connections between each image, which functions as a compartment within the mind or wider consciousness. Aisha Abraham is very interested in the trace, or found footage specifically, particularly for the work in this show, Through the Dark Mine. Obviously it's about the Kolar gold mine, but it's as much about a kind of journey into the abyss and her notebooks relating to the film, which for me even further elaborate the connection to the theme of Black Sun and to an idea of geometry that kind of prefigures the whole show. Final work in the show that you come to is Otolith Group's Otolith 3. And this film returns us actually to Satyajit Ray's The Alien, because the whole film is a construct with various different characters speaking in voiceover as if they were working towards the making or the realization of Satyajit Ray's film. Otolith 3, as well as referring to Satyajit Ray's The Alien, also incorporates images by Nasreen Mohammadi as portals to the future and how we might consider the whole construct of science fiction and how it speaks back to a universal condition of trying to understand our own being and meaning in a world in which borders are constantly shifting.